One of the major obstacles to self-realization as a Christian is the first commandment. First of all, the commandments are Jewish or Hebrew in origin, not Christian, and designed for spirits who are struggling to adapt to bodily existence. Once you have realized that you are not separated from your body and your main purpose in life is to be happy and to get along with every other body, why do you need to worry about the first commandment? The first commandment says, I am the Lord thy God, thou shalt not have strange gods before me. As a child, I was always puzzled by these words and never could figure out what they meant. I am the Lord, strange gods. What on earth are they talking about? Today, 50 years later, I still feel the same way. What are these people trying to say? I've never seen the Lord, which is a human medieval term, and I haven't seen any strange gods, only strange people talking about God. I've read about the Greek and Roman gods, but I never confused them with the real world. I think people make up these anthropomorphic images in their minds and convert them into solid objects to create the illusion of security and power. The first commandment does the same thing by placing the biggest God of all, the God of the Jews, on top of all the Roman and Greek gods. When the Christians became a rising force, they did the same thing with their Christian God by placing it above Yahweh. The brain is a poorly understood organ and is probably carrying out all kinds of complex activities our attention is never aware of. One of these functions is the ability to generate a stream of sensory impressions which can be saved as memory. Since we live out our lives in a relatively unconscious state, it's easy to accumulate an enormous amount of information about ourselves without ever knowing what we actually are. Part of the reason for this is that language itself is a rudimentary communication system which tries to convert images into sound and sound into images. Consider the images of God, ranging from the painting in the Sistine Chapel in Rome to mass-produced pictures and statues of Jesus in millions of homes across America. From these artistic depictions, we all get to see that a white male God and his son Jesus looked like. If church officials in the early days had decided to be consistent and depict God as the all and the everything, such as Allah, instead of just a Father Creator and Son Redeemer, it would have helped prevent the confusion which occurred later. When you create a religion to enlighten people, it's important to maintain a high degree of consistency. If God is all-powerful and all-knowing, then every story, every prayer, and every ceremony must remain true to that principle. But that is not what has happened. Instead, the Bible is full of stories about God's creations turning against him. A perfect God has created imperfect creatures. How can this be? Furthermore, how is it possible that God, who already knows how everything is going to turn out, is not conducting the entire affair? I believe these inexplicable reversals in thinking, known as contradictions, occur because events happen which don't fit the original description. In order to maintain consistency, we would have to change the original description to fit the event. God would no longer be all-powerful, all-knowing, all-loving, all-forgiving. When a tsunami washes away entire villages and kills thousands of good people, it calls into question the love and concern we believe God has for us. How could he allow this to happen? Is this the actions of a caring God? Therefore, we now have to decide if we are being punished for wrongdoing, or we split the Supreme Being in half with God behind the good things and the devil, Satan, behind the bad things. The Christian God in the Bible has no humor. When you think about it, doesn't it seem a little strange that anyone would want to spend eternity with a Supreme Being who never creates comedy to make the heavenly host shake with laughter? The closest we get to divine comedy in the Holy Bible is the word pleasing. He or she was pleasing to God, or "This is my beloved Son in whom I am well pleased." Personally, I would be a little nervous around such a powerful being, particularly if God was composed of three separate personalities, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. On the other hand, maybe there is a reason for the subdued atmosphere. Perhaps the hilarity died after the first revolt, when the good angels went bad, and then later when Eve bit into the apple. So maybe God doesn't laugh because he's been betrayed too many times. If I was God and I had unlimited power, I would make certain that everybody had a good time, and in turn, I would be laughing and enjoying myself. The birds would sing, the sun would shine, people would be zooming around like busy little bees, and nothing bad would ever happen. I would make certain of that because I had all the power. I would be God. Unfortunately, the God in the Bible appears to view things differently than I do. If the biblical God had a twisted sense of humor, he would enjoy watching people get themselves into trouble. When I read the bad news every day, I had to admire the complexity of the disasters and ponder the degree of genius that went into setting them up. It seems as though we are here to build cultures which are riddled with guilt and fear from the past. Even today, in our enlightened society, a baby is born supposedly innocent of any wrongdoing, and already the guilt-ridden parents are paying a priest to dunk the hapless infant in the holy water to erase the sin of Adam and Eve from its soul. If the baby is born with a non-white skin, it is told that a male Caucasian God up in the sky, up in heaven, created it and loves it unconditionally unless it disobeys him. Later, just about the time the little one reaches the age of reason, it finds out that it is responsible for the torture and murder of the Creator's only Son 2,000 years ago, even though the poor thing wasn't even alive back then. If you disobey God badly enough, you could be cast into hell and suffer horribly for eternity, even though he loves you unconditionally and forgives you. Even later, you discover you can't make friends with other folks because they belong to a different faith, even though you were told God created everyone and loves everyone. All of this and more up ahead can easily turn a humorless person into a kook on the loose unless you have the courage to start over again and consistently re-examine everything. From the point of view of an organism experiencing this life, there isn't much to laugh at, but enlarge the view and picture it as a movie or a dream that will fade away in time, and the humor begins to creep in. In fact, it requires a deliberate decision based on intelligence to make it funny, which is why we pay professional comedians to show us how to laugh. How much do we truly know about God? The American Century Dictionary defines God as the creator and ruler of the universe, and the being or spirit worshipped as immortal and with supernatural power over nature, human fortunes, etc. So having defined God, we now know what God is and what he does, and we fear God and worship him. There are serious problems connected with this act of defining and knowing God, because it presumes that God is a limited being subject to human comprehension. The act of creating God as a separate entity in itself defines you. The supernatural power and immortal character we assign to God is a description of the limits of human capabilities. God is a description of the limits of human capabilities. Anything that we do not know or cannot do is placed in the realm of God. As a way of making sense of a fluid reality with loosely defined borders, this arrangement works reasonably well until the balance of power begins to shift from God's side over to our side. The problem people like myself have with believing in God is that we just don't know what God looks like. Every religion has its own icons or symbols which represent the supreme power, but these are more like idols or false gods than the real thing. It's too bad that people have chosen to know God and talk to God and claim to have seen God because it spoils the mystery. The truth is, real God cannot be seen or known by human beings because our visual and mental faculties are not up to the task. It would be like plugging a TV into the sun. Instead of a picture and sound, there would be an explosion. You would not survive the encounter. This is precisely why we are warned in advance that we, our egoic, separate social selves, must die in order to become one with God. If this wasn't true, then God wouldn't be God. It would just be another sensory experience that you could add to all the others.